I just built a budgeting app.
What? How?
Base 44. Look, it pulls all our expenses into one place.
Welcome to a special debate edition of the Whatever podcast, coming to you live from Santa Barbara, California. I'm your host and moderator, Brian Atlas. A few quick announcements before the show begins. This podcast is viewer-supported, heavy YouTube demonetization, so please consider donating through Streamlabs, super chatting as YouTube takes all the details. Without further ado, if you guys want to just introduce yourselves quickly.
Yeah, my name is Andrew Wilson, host of The Crucible, it's the fastest growing debate channel on YouTube, to my knowledge. Political satirist, political commentator, and I do blood sport debates. So I'd like to thank my opponent for coming out today. I really appreciate that very much, and I'm looking forward to a good faith debate.
All right, welcome.
I'm Carly. I'm a UCSB student. I'm just a random person.
Well, no, hold on. So you're what are you studying at UCSB?
Political science.
Are you a grad student or undergrad?
I'm undergrad.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and we had you on one of our dating talks about, it was what, 2 weeks ago or so?
Yeah.
And Andrew did a call-in on that show, and you guys had quite, I thought, quite a good back and forth on various topics: feminism, sexism, racism, I think some other stuff. Did we talk about the geopolitics of Georgia?
No, we haven't gotten into that
Not
yet.
into that?
Not
Okay,
yet.
maybe a little later
Maybe
on
today.
the show. Perhaps a good place to start is, what did you guys disagree on during the podcast?
Well, I think primarily our focus was on feminist ideals and the optimal ways to raise families. So I'm happy to kind of dive in on that if you'd like.
Sure, yeah.
So that we're not speaking past each other, when you define feminism, would you define it as the pursuance of egalitarianism between men and women?
Yes.
No other real qualifiers?
Not for me. I do think it's difficult to define because I think that everyone kind of has their own definitions. Mm-hmm. So when talking about it, it's difficult to discuss feminism as a monolithic thing. But yeah, I think it's a good working definition.
If it's a movement towards egalitarianism, this would imply that there was not egalitarianism, and so feminism was set in opposition to patriarchy.
Yes, I would agree.
Okay, so that's an entailment we can agree to.
Yeah.
So I'd like to start with a basic argument before I move to larger arguments. My first argument, my first objection, is what I call an equal force objection. Men are the enforcement arm of society. And because they are the enforcers of rights, and I don't believe that rights exist as an objective standard, but rather they're a social construction of the mind, what I think we actually have is what's called force, right? So force are rights. That's all rights really can be, because the entailment of a right is it's only as good as who can enforce it. I do not believe that women can enforce their own rights, and that only men can enforce their rights, and so therefore I do not believe egalitarianism is possible, nor should it be something that we move towards.
Mm-hmm. So you think that men are the enforcement arm in the sense that they enforce rights, or our conception of rights, or are you arguing that they're the enforcement arm as in they're enforcing law and order?
Well, let's back up to make sure that we're not speaking past each other again.
Okay.
So rights, you would agree, are not a tangible thing, but they're just a conception. They're
I agree with that.
A social construction.
Yes.
So if you are to have a right, an entitlement, absent a duty, if we can define a right as that, then what you're really talking about is force. You're talking about having force to make sure that you have this entitlement. That would be necessary. And so when I'm talking about force, I'm saying that men have the monopoly on force. And because they have a monopoly on force, anytime they so choose, they can take the rights away from women, but it's never possible the other way around.
I guess I would disagree that rights are only upheld through force. In this day and age, I think that it's easy to say that hypothetically men could turn against women and use brute strength and brute force to take away rights, but I think that
Sorry.
it's okay. I think that we have a pretty
Are you mocking her, Brian?
a pretty well-founded legal system that we used to uphold rights, or our conception of rights. I think I would disagree that rights are only force. I do agree that they are a social construction.
Your legal system is force.
I mean, the legal system, yes, it's force. It's coercion, but I think...
Well, no, it's not just coercion. It's force. So if absent you doing whatever the legal system determines you must do, what is the remedy?
I mean, that's a good point. I just think that... Do you think that rights are enforced, like, physically? Like,
yes.
Do you think that men... Okay.
Physically.
Could you give me an example of that? Because I think I don't really fully understand.
If you want to make an appeal that your rights are in some way being taken away from you, or your rights in some way are being violated, who would you make the appeal to?
Supreme Court? I don't know.
And so let's assume whoever you make this appeal to on a court agrees with you. They're going to be able to use the power of their office to appeal to brute force in order to defend or take your right away. So if I want to send you to prison, I'm taking your rights away, right? Does that require force? Physical force?
Yes.
And does it require physical force to keep you there?
Yeah, I would say that taking someone to prison and keeping someone in prison does require physical force. But I mean, I guess abortion rights, it's a very recent... I fail to see how the right to get an abortion, maybe not the right, because obviously punishing someone who performs an illegal abortion involves taking someone to prison, but how is the right to an abortion upheld by physical force?
Well, because if you go to get an abortion, okay, and somebody comes in to stop you from getting an abortion, meaning they're going to stop you from exercising that right, if that's a right you believe you have, wouldn't you make an appeal to men with guns to come in and stop them from stopping you from doing that?
Okay, I think I understand what you mean now. I think I didn't fully understand what you mean. But, in that case, women can train to use weaponry and use guns. I mean, we have weaponry now that can kind of fill the gap between men and women's...
Everything comes down to actual physical force. And let me explain what I mean. There's not one time in history, ever, that you can point to where women have been able to collectively use force in order to dominate men. However, every point in history I can almost point to where men can and have done that. And the opposite cannot be true. Meaning that if men in even small collectives decide to take the rights away from women, there's not actually anything women can do about it. However, if women mildly and collectively, or in a small or large collective, try to take the rights away from men, there is something they can do about that.
But I do think that would require somehow taking weaponry out of the picture. I mean, but...
You don't need to take weaponry out of the picture. Weapons require strength to use. Those who are strong can use them better. Not only that, field equipment weighs a lot, right? Equipment in general weighs a lot. You also have the endurance problem, the skeletal problems. You have the heat regulation problems. The distinctions between men and women are incredible. And so when you look at a force applicator, men have a monopoly on force. By the way, I can demonstrate this pretty easy. Western nations have become more egalitarian than they ever have been. You would agree, right?
Yeah.
But who still stays predominantly in these enforcement positions?
I mean, predominantly, yes, but
why?
Women... Well, obviously, I totally agree with you that there is a physical difference between men and women, and they are stronger. But I do think that the gap is significantly smaller with weaponry. I don't think it's fully, brought to an equal playing field. But
in other words, if men have weapons and women have weapons, women lose.
I mean, yeah, but there are women in law enforcement.
Yes.
There are female prison wardens, COs, things like that. So
and they are, and while there are some exceptional women, I agree, who can be inside of positions like this, there are some exceptional women. Maybe one day we'll have that first female Navy SEAL. Maybe it'll happen. Okay, it hasn't happened yet, but one day there will be an exceptional Navy SEAL, badass G.I. Jane type chick who can wear the skin-tight leather with the hand grenades and do the ninja kicks. But those are going to be exceptional cases.
I agree that they are exceptional cases, but you're saying, so men are the default enforcement arm of rights, of legal rights, but there are women in those positions, so I fail to see. And
because men can take them away from them collectively whenever they so choose. And they have no recourse, but men always do, which is force.
Collectively, sure, but I mean, there are still exceptions to that, so that there are women in those positions, and by and large, men are stronger than women, but there are weak men and there are strong women. And I feel that, I mean, the exceptions to those cases do present a problem.
But even weaker men, even much weaker men, are still usually stronger than even average women. And
I agree with that.
This is the problem with equalization. For instance, if you were to have a prison, okay, or, you know, let's try this a different way. Let's say that you were a general in the armed forces, and you had a special forces unit which was compiled of 100% women and one that was compiled of 100% men. And you had a job which you absolutely had to get done. It was critical. It was mission critical. Who'd you turn it over to?
I would turn it over to a man.
You turn it over to the men because they would be much more excellent performing those duties than women, right?
Yeah, and I can totally agree with you on that, but I do think that the presence of women in those positions, I mean, they are present in those positions. And also, I guess my question would be, do you think that the enforcement of rights is the most important part of a well-functioning society? Like, do you think that is...
The enforcement of law and order is critical to society. So the Greeks said, without law, there is no freedom, right? You would agree that that's probably true. I don't see how you could really descend into anarchy and have actual freedom. It would just end up in like a slave eats slave oppressive, you know, this type of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that law and the enforcement of law and rights and the enforcement of rights or duties and the enforcement of duties are critical to a society. So while I don't believe in the construction of rights because they don't really exist absent force, I do understand that having some kind of core belief towards something can be useful in keeping a cohesive society together. But I don't believe that women are capable of doing that. And so because they're not equal, they cannot be equal because of this. I don't understand why they should have equal rights to vote, why they should have equal rights to men if they are not in the position.
See how, okay, women cannot physically enforce their own rights. Egalitarian society is not possible because, I mean, even the way you said it, law and order is only one critical aspect of a well-functioning society. So if that's only one critical aspect, then how can you say, well, this one aspect and the fact that men are going to dominate this one aspect, they're not going to be the sole, you know, that women will exist, but men will dominate this one aspect. How can you say that
because they're always going to be
that
making the appeal to men for those rights, and there's no way around it. And so men can collectively take the rights away from women, period. They just can. There's nothing that women can do about this. So egalitarianism in and of itself would just be an illusion. It would literally be a lie. You would be walking around saying that you're equal with men. You have equality with them, while at the same time necessarily having to appeal to them for that equality, which it makes it contradictory, right? How do you appeal to the thing for equality while at the same time saying that you're equal?
So you think that the fact that women have to appeal to men for their equality means that there shouldn't be an attempt at like an egalitarian society? There shouldn't.
Well, what is the attempt? It would be an illusion, right? Men can just collectively take it away, but women cannot do that to the opposition. Only men can. So men can take away men's rights, and men can take away women's rights, and men can give men rights, and men can give women rights, but women can't give men rights nor take men's rights away.
I mean, if I just think it's easier to say that our system of rights, I mean, I know that I agree with you that our rights are sort of a construct, but we do have in practice legal rights. I find it hard to just say that, like, well, that's all an illusion, because we're living it every day. I mean, we have legal rights. If you commit a crime, you go to jail. I mean, that is all a social construct, but we're living it. I mean,
you're talking about a descriptor of is and ought. It is true. We go through life with all sorts of kind of presuppositions and suppositions which aren't true all the time to get through the day. We do this all the time. For instance, there's no real reason for you to go in and turn your car on and think it's going to start, except that you're a pattern recognition machine and it's always started, and so you assume that it's going to start. If you had some pre-knowledge that it wouldn't, you would have taken the steps to make sure that the next day you got in and it would start, right? Everything that you do in your life as you're going through it is built on all sorts of unfounded suppositions that probably aren't true at all, but we still act as though they are in order to have a society. But eventually, what ends up happening is we do have to face down actual facts and actual reality. And in actual reality, if you end up with too much internal conflict based around this egalitarian system, what's actually going to prevent men from just taking away women's rights altogether? There doesn't seem like there's anything that would stop that from happening.
I mean, that would require like widespread, like mass violence by men against women.
Why would it require any violence?
I mean, well, okay, because if you're saying it wouldn't require violence, then you're giving some kind of like, you're admitting that this system of legality that we have has some kind of like...
No, I'm just saying that if it is true that men can, by use of force, and I think most women know this, could do this, why, if they decided to, do you think that women would, what do you think they could do about it? Take to the street with their little signs and say, please don't?
But I don't, to me that sounds like you're saying it would be an act of violence. How are men going to take away women's rights without violence?
If men collectively tomorrow say women have no more rights, what are the options left to women?
I mean, legal, political exercises. And in that case, you say men are stronger. They could exercise violence against women to take their rights away,
They
right?
may not need to exercise any violence. All they may need to do is just say, you no longer have the rights, and women really just can't do anything about it. They could maybe collectivize with signs, but what happens if they're just ignored or laughed at or scoffed or mocked, and they can't really take violence to men? So in political action, right, there is always what is called the violent alternative, and men can always appeal to that alternative. It's a terrible thing. I'm not advocating for that. I'm giving a descriptor for what is true. This is something which can be appealed to for men, but only for men. Women can only do small scale. So even in kind of the craziest feminists you can think of, the best they were able to do is like send some boom booms in the mail and this kind of thing. But they couldn't really push back against a structure of strength. It wasn't really possible for them to do. You see the voting gap as it begins to widen, as men become more right-wing and women more left-wing. What happens eventually if what is considered the patriarchy has been pushed against just decides one day, no more rights for women?
I think in that case, there would be political opposition, and I think...
Where's the widespread? No. And I'm telling you, I don't think that that's the case. Everything down from the husband inside of the home to the boyfriend inside of the home.
Women, and I don't believe that most men would be willing to, because I don't think that it was about violence. I think that it was about a lack of political rights, if I can use that word.
Well then, but we
political
already
entitlements.
We've